Thank you, Tom Wolf. Welcome to the Rotary Club of Tulsa, where service above self is more than a motto, it's a way of life. We appreciate you being here. Here at the Rotary Club of Tulsa, we are serving the needs and making a difference to people here in Tulsa and around the world. Welcome, welcome, welcome. You know you're in Oklahoma, and it's spring when you wake up in the morning and you turn on the Weather Channel, and they're broadcasting live from Oklahoma City and playing repeats of tornadoes that have occurred over and over. So for those of you that have not heard, weather warning this evening, so keep your eye out. So as we take a minute to greet each other, maybe you can share a tornado experience that you've had, right? That should be easy to talk about. So let's say hello to each other. Okay. So many tornado stories. Okay, we've got a busy schedule today. We're going to go ahead and get started. Diane Peacock is going to lead us in our invocation. Bill Miller is going to lead us in our song and pledge, and Becky Fields will introduce our visitors. Diane?
Thank you. Thank you. Let us bow our heads. Dear Father, we come to you with thankful hearts. We are grateful for the life that you have given each one of us. In our lives as Rotarians, we strive for service to others before service to ourselves. We look to you for strength in this task. Let us not grow weary in this noble goal, and let us not take lightly the motto of, "He profits most who serves his fellow man best," as was adopted over 100 years ago at the initial convention of the Rotary Clubs of America. We ask for your help with sustaining all the programs we have chosen. Fill our hearts with joy as we see the dreams of others come true. Let us gain satisfaction looking into the hearts and eyes of those we serve. Guide us as we pursue the projects of tomorrow. Help us not just say the words, but truly embrace in our hearts the motto of Rotary: "He profits most who serves his fellow man the best." Thank you for this day, and thank you for this food. To you we pray. Amen.
On this beautiful Rotary Day, let's sing "God Bless America." God bless America, land that I love. Stand beside her and guide her through the night with a light from above. From the mountains to the prairies, to the oceans white with foam. God bless America, my home, sweet home. pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Hello, we are so excited to welcome our guests today, and we would love to welcome you personally. If you'll please stand where you are, along with your host Rotarian, and then at the end we'll give everyone a round of applause. Derek Braddock is with Prima Donna Braddock. Pam Johnson of Jewish Community Center is with Linda Wilson. And Nathan Koob of Seltzer Schaefer Architects is with John Stava. Melissa Bogle of Gable Gotwells and Sue Wagner of Gable Gotwells, both here with Jeff Hassel. Toy Chambers is here with Lane Dolly. And Brenda Bennett and Jenna Scher are here with Sarah Fry. And Ginger Homan is here with Mike Homan. Thank you for coming. And we have visiting Rotarians today. With Rotaract, we have Jonathan Slay. With Rotaract, we have Rachel Gentes. With Rotaract, we have Cole Adamson. And with Rotaract, we have Rachel Ellsworth. And with Southside Tulsa, we have Spencer Groden. With Pauls Valley Rotary Club, we have Logan Beatles. With Sunrise Rotary Club, we have Philip Jackson. And, another for Cole. So thank you so much for visiting Rotarians for coming today, and we hope you enjoyed the meeting.
Thank you, Diane, Bill, and Becky. And welcome guests. Thank you for joining us today. If you're looking for a place to make a difference in your community and around the world and do that alongside Tulsa's finest business and community leaders, this is the place, and we would love to have you join us. So please consider joining us. And welcome Rotaractors. Love having so many Rotaractors here. We appreciate you coming out and visiting with us today. Thank you. Okay, let's thank this week's meeting sponsors whose sponsorship goes a long ways to help pay for the cost of running the operation here. David Wolfers with James Potts and Wolfers, and then Paul Bauman, Gordon Greer, Monty Curry, and Bill Miller with Bank First. We appreciate you all. And as always, we encourage you to consider doing business with Rotarians when you have a need. So in addition to today's sponsors, let's also thank this week's meeting volunteers who help this meeting run so smoothly every week. Thank you, volunteers. Okay, a few announcements to share with you. Week after next, on May 16th, we will be meeting off-site at the Tulsa Zoo. Okay, so do not show up here. Show up at the Tulsa Zoo, and there's a RSVP card on your table. And so please sign up if you think you're going to come. And of course, guests are welcome. We encourage you to bring guests out there. So sign up your guests also. We'll need some sort of head count. Saturday, May 19th, from 8 till noon, we have another hands-on volunteer opportunity out at the Medical Supply Network warehouse. So I would encourage you to consider signing up for that. It's a great opportunity to bring your kids too, your grandkids if they might be interested in that. It's a great opportunity to help out. And again, those supplies are sent all around the world, so you're helping out locally but influencing worldwide. That's May 19th. Please sign up. And then on the Monday after that Saturday, May 21st, we're going to be getting together for a Tulsa Drillers baseball game. They have a noon game, starts at 12:05, and we have reserved a suite. And so the first 20 people to sign up for that game, are we limited to 20 people? Sign up for that game, and it's $20 a person. That gets you in the game, and there's food and soft drinks available. So please look at your calendar, see if you can attend that game on the 21st. It'll be great fun. And to sign up, see either Tina, David Downing, or Alicia Herrera. Committee meetings after our meeting here today. The trustees are meeting in room 233, and then the budget committee is meeting in room 234. Now we have a couple side mic announcements. First, Matthew Bristow.
Thank you. 2 weeks ago, I talked about the new meals and dues structure, and I said I would come back today and compile the questions I was asked into some answers. So if we could have the first slide. First question I had was how does our new dues and meals structure compare to other Rotary clubs? We looked at clubs in our district, but for the most part, they are smaller clubs who have fewer members than we have committees. So they don't have a paid staff, and it's difficult to do a comparison there. So their dues are cheaper, their meals are often optional. But what we did instead was took data from a year ago and looked at major clubs around the country. You've got the member count on there, so ranging from about 200 members to 600 members. And Tulsa, our new structure compares pretty favorably. 1185 total, which is 710 of dues and 475 of meals, in a range of going from 1160 to 1950. I eliminated all the big sort of Los Angeles and other high dollar cities, but that was the responses. We were pretty reasonably priced with our new structure. Second one is, if I pay dues only, so if I chose to do 710 a year and pay dues only, where do I sit? Do I have to sit at the seats at the back, or can I sit anywhere? And the answer is you can sit anywhere. The intent is for the cost of being in the room, of the linens, everything else is set up. The only thing you're paying for additionally is for the meals. So, and if you do choose to prepay, it's the equivalent of $9.50 a meal, because you're paying for the entire year, and we recognize you might not be here for some of the meals. If you're paying each week for the meal and you want to pay for a meal a particular week, you just pay $13 for that. How can we pay for meals? Is it per meeting? Is it monthly, quarterly, semi-annually? So starting July 1, we're going to make it easier for how you pay dues and how you pay meals. So you can do every 6 months, as you're currently doing. You're going to be able to pay by check, by ACH, direct out of your checking account, by credit card. You can also set up a monthly ACH debit from your checking account or a monthly automated credit card. And then if you do it at the check-in table, you can pay cash, credit card, or check. One thing that we're doing this year to mitigate credit card fees is if you want to pay by credit card like you currently have been, you can at the rate I proposed. If you want a discount, 1.6%, you can pay by cash or check or ACH. So the final slide for you today is just a reminder, this is what we proposed, is the annual 1185 all in, or just 710 if you're doing dues only, which would be $13 a meal, or zero and sit anywhere if you do no meal. Over to you, Mike.
Thank you. Good job, Matthew. Good job. Okay, so our club bylaws require that if we are going to make a change to our dues structure, that the membership vote to approve that. So before I call for a vote, are there any more questions? Oops, you're good. You did good. You answered them all. Good job, Matthew. Okay, so I am going to call for a voice vote. So all of those in favor of the new dues structures beginning July 1 of this year, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? So the dues structure passes. So thank you very much. And Matthew, thank you. Matthew has done yeoman's work on this thing for so long. Yes, yes. And he will tell you, and rightfully so, there's been a lot of other people that have been involved in this, but Matthew's been the one carrying the water pail all this time, so we appreciate you. Okay, Becky Fields, you have a side mic announcement also on Rotary, Roses, and Rosé.
Thank you, President Mike. That is coming up on May 17th at 5:30 p.m. at Kip Lycom's home, a beautiful garden party. And if you haven't been to his home, it is a lovely backyard. It's like a park. So you definitely want to be there and bring your guests. It's just a nice time to be able to come network with your fellow Rotarians and to bring someone that's a prospective member that might enjoy joining Rotary. So you can sign up. The emails have been going out. You can sign up through that or on Facebook. There's an Evite, or just email me and I can get you signed up. Just make sure to go ahead and make the RSVP. It's only for 50 people, and we have about 15 spots left, so I expect those to probably fill up this week. So, thanks.
Thank you, Becky. And thank you, Kip. Kip's place is actually kind of the Rotary Club of Tulsa's gathering place. And we appreciate that, because it is. It's a wonderful place. We appreciate you sharing that with us. Charles, it is your time to shine.
I appreciate the reminder about the, potential weather stuff. I've got to get I got to get my, chairs out on the front lawn and buy a beverage and then, be ready for all that excitement.
Exactly.
Especially since, a couple years back, and Jeff remembers this, I tried out for the Storm Chasers and
Oh, that's right.
they never called me back.
Really?
I don't understand.
I don't either. You would be awesome at it.
When you're hit by hail on, you feel like you earned your stripes, and
Exactly.
apparently I did not. Yeah. But anyway, how's everybody doing? Everybody ready for tonight? Excited? It's going to be fun? All right. Well, let's get started here.
Raise the roof, huh?
We're going to raise... Hopefully not, but we'll see. All right. Right off, our good friend Roberta Preston. She is being honored by the Collins College of Business at TU that is honoring outstanding alumni and students. And, of course, we found this online, so we wanted to make sure that we find her. So not only we found her, but we find her, and she paid it. Congratulations, Roberta. Are you out there hiding? There you go. All right. I think I saw her somewhere. Okay. Next up, our good friends Ainsley Stanford. Years of service with Northwestern Mutual Insurance. You see the $50 up there. 50 years with Northwestern Mutual. I mean, that's pretty amazing. A half a century taking care of business in one place. Is he here? Is he hiding somewhere? Hey, he must be busy. He's trying to, it's that time of year. Okay. Speaking of that time of year, so Sundays you get out, you're doing your little Sunday drives and everything, and you start looking at homes, and Kathy Gorell, she can appreciate that. You're looking and just seeing what other people are putting in their yards, seeing what houses are for sale, and then you come across this, and unfortunately there wasn't an open house, but if there is, I think I might go back by. Anyway, so if you see that type of stuff, just take it into consideration. It was over in your neighborhood, by the way. Yeah.
I think I recognize that
Do you
house.
recognize it?
Yeah, it looks like
all right.
mine.
Well, very good. Thank you all. Have a wonderful week. All right.
Thank you, Charles. Okay, now we have our vocational minute with Dave Moore, Tulsa Wealth Advisors. Dave, the mic is all yours for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just a couple months ago, I was standing up here introducing the speaker of the day, and at the time, we were talking about and remembering a fellow Rotarian who allowed me to serve on the board of his nonprofit. And at the time, I was just graduating from Leadership Tulsa. That's class of 24, by the way. And he taught me a lot about how to run a board. And he also taught me a lot about the nonprofit industry, the community. And as you all know, the guy I'm talking about is Sid Patterson. But I would not be standing here today if it wasn't for another fellow Rotarian who, through his company, showed me the industry that I would ultimately be working in. And I remember it was April 20th of 1990. I went to Jack Maxwell at Maxwell Temps. I said, hey, can you get me a job? And so he introduced me to a financial planning firm. And it didn't take long, but shortly I realized, with me and a couple other guys, we could start our own financial planning firm. So fast forward to today, and you have Tulsa Wealth Advisors. That's tulsawealthadvisors.com. So what we've been able to do through the years is to help hundreds of families, hundreds of individuals with their financial planning goals and their life goals. Whether it be through insurance planning, estate planning, income planning, tax planning, or just general retirement planning. But it's been a blast. And the thing is, as Rotarians, we do try to influence our community in a positive way, right? But I think what we forget as Rotarians, we influence each other in a positive way as well. So I'm here to thank you for influencing my life in a positive way, both in business and personal. Thanks.
Oh. That's a great story, Dave. Thank you for sharing that. That's awesome. Okay, I am now going to introduce our Rotarian of today, Mr. Jeff Hassel. Jeff is an attorney at Gable Gottwalls, where he handles transactions involving mergers and acquisitions, joint ventures, commercial loans, and other legal matters for both large and small businesses. He was president of our club just 2 years ago. He is a 2-time chair of the IBA Awards. Wow. A community fellow, a Paul Harris fellow, and Jeff currently serves on the Long Range Planning Committee. And I also want to note our awesome speaker is here today because of Jeff, and we appreciate all that you did to get her here today. So please join me in welcoming to the podium Jeff Hassel.
Thank you, President Mike. It's my honor today to introduce our speaker, Shannon Sedgwick Davis. I'm going to take a little sideline, though, first and introduce one of her colleagues, Adam Fink, who is here with her, and he's going to help with the slides. Adam, thank you for being here as well. I can tell Shannon really leans on you, it's been great to get to know you. I first saw and met Shannon at the Large Club Conference in San Antonio in 2015, and right then and there I knew that somehow, some way, I needed to try to get her to Tulsa to tell her story to my fellow Tulsans, and so this is a bit of a dream come true for me. In doing my research on Shannon, I pulled a few nuggets about her that are interesting, and I think that's appropriate for me to introduce her by sharing those nuggets. She's been described as a person who is impatient with half measures. She actually attended the 80th birthday celebration for Archbishop Desmond Tutu. She has personally carried young girls out of brothels in Cambodia. Sir Richard Branson has said about Shannon, "There's no other woman in the world quite like her." She serves on the Advisory Council to the Elders, an independent organization of world leaders founded by Nelson Mandela. The Elders is committed to promoting the shared interests of humanity and universal human rights. Today, Shannon is the CEO of the Bridgeway Foundation, a philanthropic organization dedicated to ending and preventing mass atrocities around the world. She's a graduate of McMurray University and Baylor Law School, and she sits on the board of other organizations, including Humanity United, TOMS, and Charity Water. If you Google Shannon, you will find that she has admirers all over the world and in the United States from Hollywood to the Northeast, and the list goes on and on. So please help me welcome Shannon Sedgwick Davis for our little Q&A. So let's do a quick mic test first. Are you working?
Test.
All right.
Yes.
Everybody hear us okay? Great. So, Shannon, I always have to remind myself that a lot of people in our audience may not have done all the research I have. So let's kind of start with the basics. You're a native Texan. You were a volleyball player in college. All of those things sound sort of down the middle, don't stray too far. And then suddenly you're most known now for all of your work internationally and overseas. So for those of us who haven't had the same life experiences as you, tell us, what is it that caused a person like you to suddenly be so focused on things so far away?
Yes, thanks, and thank you for the wonderful introduction. I said last night, we had a dinner last night that I spoke at, and I said I'm going to just take Jeff with me everywhere I go to do my introductions. It's very generous. You know, I was really blessed to have two parents that focused on service during my childhood, and we served from the time that I was a little girl, and I really just didn't know any life other than one that involves serving others. And it was just something very natural for me and something that made my heart beat fast. We My mom was a youth pastor in San Antonio, Texas, of a large church. She had about 2,000 youth in her youth group. And so we would go on, 4 or 5 mission trips a year and spend time on the border there in San Antonio. And really just really got ingrained in me, I think, this idea that the world is quite a bit bigger than ourselves, and that our most extraordinary, I believe, our most extraordinary rewards in our best life is lived through serving others. So I knew that when I went to law school. I knew I wanted to use my law degree for something good and to serve others. But there was a massive earthquake, you guys will remember, that happened in 2000 in Turkey. And I was associated then with a group at our law school that had decided to go over during our spring breaks and help serve. This little boy is a boy that I met while I was over there. So we were doing some humanitarian and aid work. And I stayed on one side of Istanbul. And as you know, Istanbul's on 2 continents. And I would take the ferry boat across every day to go do some work for quake relief. And then I would take the ferry boat back across at night to spend the night and do the same thing the next morning. And this boy was a boy that was at the landing of the ferry, and in that yellow bag that he's carrying, he had a bunch of Kleenex boxes. So he was a beggar child, a street child, and he would ask you to buy his Kleenex boxes. And the first day that I showed up, Pilar came, his name is Pilar. Pilar came running up to me and asked me to buy some Kleenexes. And I gave him some money. I didn't take any Kleenexes, gave him some money for food and said, oh, go get yourself some food. And I watched as the older kids came and took his money away. And so the next day I thought, oh, I'm going to be really smart. I'll go buy him some food, right? And so that way the money's not taken. So I went and bought him some food and handed it to him. And as I was loading onto the ferry, I watched the older kids take the food and eat it, and drink the food. And so that's really when my relationship with Pilar began, because I think often we kind of discharge our responsibilities in a very convenient fashion, or at least that had been my choice. And what I really learned is there's something incredible and magical about being present with someone. So every morning and every evening when I'd come back across, I'd buy Pilar a meal, and then I'd sit down and eat it with him. And it just really solidified for me that relationship, getting to know that child. So it really didn't involve the quake relief at all. It involved more of an injustice and an international injustice. Solidified for me that was the kind of work that I wanted to do with my law degree.
And wow, what an adventure. I hardly know where to start. So let's inform our members here who are business owners, et cetera. Tell us a little bit about the Bridgeway Foundation, of which you are the CEO, and we'll go from there.
Great. So our company is a money management and mutual funds company. We have about $12 billion under management, and we give half of our profits away to try to stop war, or a minimum of half of our profits. So at times in the past and historically, that's been much higher. In 2008, when the bottom fell out of the market, half of zero is zero, and for the next several years, we were not profitable. So we gave out of our company's reserves. So we are a bit higher than the 50% mark. An extraordinary founder that just had a vision for wanting to make a difference in the world, was heavily impacted by the Holocaust, and decided he wanted to create a company that could be very generous in terms of trying to stop these atrocities in the world.
And you told me that it took him a while to convince you to come to the foundation. So a couple, 3 requests. What were you doing before you came to Bridgeway?
Yeah, so after I knew I wanted to use my law degree for good, and then I kind of convinced myself right at the end of law school, when I was looking at about 6 figures worth of law school debt, that I should probably take the big law firm job for a little while, pay down the debt, and then go look for a public service job. And while I was in the midst of that, I was working at a big downtown Dallas law firm. I I came across a man named Gary Haugen's book, and he runs an organization called the International Justice Mission. And they are tasked with going overseas to many different regions and trying to help really bridge the gap between injustice and law enforcement there. And so things like human trafficking, as Jeff said in the introduction, a lot of the work involved child sex slavery, other issues where widows had their land stolen, issues of injustice. And so I read his book, and I kind of did the same thing that John from Bridgeway did to me. I kind of started really bugging him, calling him quite a bit. They were very small at the time. And eventually got a meeting with him and ended up deciding that now was the time. So moved to Washington, D.C. and joined the International Justice Mission. And that really laid the framework. So I knew that I was passionate about injustice in the world, but I didn't know that there could be actually an outlet for that, right? I think that we assume when there's big international justice issues that we need to rely on big multinational bodies that often, and let's be honest, have been, of late really failing us. I mean, the United Nations has not been able to get a handle on a lot of these problems. And so I think we often just say, it's best left to them, or we try to do a lot of advocacy. So we try to make a stink about it in order to get the US government engaged and others engaged. But what I found with Gary and International Justice Mission was a methodology for my passion. So they actually were willing to do direct action. There were children that were being held in brothels, minor children, and they were willing to work alongside local law enforcement to go in and get those children. And that really provided a foundation for some of the work that I do now. I ended up joining an organization called Geneva Global, and I was managing their human trafficking portfolio, so a bunch of grants that they would give and making sure that those grants were spent well. And that's where John Montgomery, the founder of Bridgeway, came to know me and started to ask me if I would come be involved and run what he calls one half of his company. So he really very much views the company and the mission as one, and that's been really powerful to see.
So I would describe those organizations as hands-on. A pretty good description of how they view their role and how they do things.
I think that's right, yes.
So that hands-on experience led you to Bridgeway, and so now you're trying to be hands-on as part of Bridgeway. It takes a lot of people to do that. So tell us about your staff and the people that are involved with the Bridgeway Foundation that work with you.
Yeah, so I work with some great people. Adam, who's here with me now. We have in terms of the fact that we give away half of our profits, we try to really keep a nimble team. And as a result, we'll find that a lot of our team members, including myself, are willing to multitask. So Adam spends most of his time in Africa doing incredibly hard work for me on a helicopter messaging to get rebel warlords out of the jungle. And then it's twilighting now as the slide clicker. So he's just one example of incredible people that I am privileged to work with and that I get to learn from every day. So I'm incredibly grateful to him and my team. I've got others that work with us that are based in the continent. We usually will subcontract out with them or have some sort of association with them where we'll support their organizations, but not directly through an employment relationship. And then I've got some staff in San Antonio, which is where I'm based and where I run the foundation from. I let Adam and his colleagues live wherever they want to live, because I think when you're spending half of your time across in Africa, the other half when you're back home should be wherever you'd like to be. And so most of them live in California, their families are there, and so that's where they base when they're here.
So we're going to talk about some specific situations in a minute, but generally tell us about your travel over the last 6-8 years. How many days or what percentage of the time have you been overseas versus back here in the States? How far and for how long does your work take you away?
So I think at the height of our work, we launched and kind of piloted a very unique mission to try to stop war. And that required, I think because of the risks that were entailed in that and the sort of the nuance of that mission. The early days of that mission, I spent an extraordinary amount of time on the ground, just wanting to manage that and just make sure I had my eyeballs on anything that could sort of possibly arise out there. So probably my hardest year was about probably half the year away. Not half the year at once. I try not to ever be gone more than about 10 days at a time. So it's a ton of time in a metal tube in the sky because shuttling back and forth. But I have 2 little boys and I don't like to be gone for long. That's really been able to ratchet down, again, because of great and incredible partners like Adam and some of my other colleagues who've been able to take a little bit of that workload too. So probably last year, in terms of total travel, I was gone about a third of the year, maybe even just a fourth.
Still, that's a lot. Yeah, very much. So I want everybody to hear about your relationship with the elders and how you became involved and what relationships you've developed through that organization.
Yes, the Elders is a wonderful organization that was founded. We're having our 10th anniversary this summer on what would have been Nelson Mandela's 100th birthday. So that'll be on July 18th in Johannesburg. You'll see Mandela there in the center. He helped found this organization. So I think as he was getting quite old and frail, he had this idea for a while, and it was one that he concocted with Sir Richard Branson, who is seated there to his right, and Peter Gabriel, who's seated there to his left. They had really discussed this idea of what would it look like to collect all this wisdom that was contained in people that potentially had been former presidents of companies, potentially had been former major religious leaders and former UN leaders. And what would it look like now that they were out of their official responsibilities? What would it look like to pull them into a group, a council, if you will, and kind of direct them towards some of the world's hardest problems? The thinking was, now that they were no longer constrained by politics, if you will, or by having to impress their base or their particular constituents, perhaps they would have a little more leeway to actually go out and really lobby and advocate for some of these issues, and maybe advocate for solutions that are a little less accepted, but higher risk solutions, but might have a greater chance of real reward. And so he founded this group. Former President Carter is a member of this group. The Archbishop Desmond Tutu, who is also from South Africa, and is just an incredible being, is part of the group. We have many former presidents. Mary Robinson, former president of Ireland, who's just a tremendous woman. Gru Brundtland is a part of it. Marty Ahtisaari, Kofi Annan. And so for the last 10 years, I sit on the board for that organization. There's 10 of us that sit on the advisory board. And so we'll meet 2 to 3 times a year and discuss some of these harder and intractable issues and try to come up with creative ways that we can use the collective wisdom of these elders, if you will, to try to pursue change. The way that we determined who we gave invitations to initially was by polling in over 60 countries, polling citizens in over 60 countries, saying, whose voice do you respect most in the world? And a bunch of names floated to the top, and invitations were made on that basis. That said, we did have kind of a threshold for elders. So like Oprah's name was one of the ones that came in. Well, we didn't consider her to be of yet an elder, if you will. Bono's name, who I think is visiting you guys tonight, today, yes. His name floated to the top as well, but we didn't extend an invitation because he was still considered very young. And then a few other names that floated to the top were still very actively involved in politics or their positions, and so it wasn't appropriate at the time to extend an invitation.
It's fascinating. So down to some nitty-gritty here. There was a period of time that is the most publicized about your work, as far as I know, from about 2009 to 2015 with Bridgeway, and you talked about it a lot last night, and I really want the group to hear today. So tell us about the first thing that kind of set off that chain of events that got you started on that, and to kind of lead us through the story.
Yeah, so as I mentioned at the beginning, our company has this unusual, shall I say, mission statement for a financial services firm or a money management company, right? And it's to stop war and to stop mass genocide. And we were giving a lot of grants. In 2008, we gave a substantial amount of money away since we were able to give half of our profits away. But we were finding that we weren't really stopping war or stopping mass atrocity, right? Like we would go into an area where perhaps a rebel group had burned down a school and we'd build a new school. Or go into an area where a well was compromised because of conflict and perhaps pay to have another well drilled. Provide medical supplies and staff to an area or a region that was being deeply affected by conflict and by some bad actor out in the region. And so it felt more like we were addressing the symptoms of conflict and not truly trying to stop conflict. I often say it was like we were putting Band-Aids on bullet holes. It was important work, and it is important work, but it wasn't true to our mission. And so we really took a step.
This was in Africa, right?
Yes, most of our work was in Africa. We were granting at the time in over 60 countries. So pretty spread out, granting in all of these different mass atrocities. And we just had a really hard meeting where I just posed the question in our board meeting, I think we either want to mean what we say or we want to redraft our mission statement to be more accurate. And we decided to try and mean what we say. And so that was a large mandate for me that year. And I did have only a very few staff. And so I guess when you sit there and you say, okay, we're going to try to stop war, the natural next question is, what war are we going to try to stop? And so we looked across our granting portfolio that was in those 60 countries and really took a look at the different conflicts that we had been engaged in, at least at a small level in terms of our grant making. And the conflict that absolutely seemed to have the most momentum for actual change and solutions to me felt like it was this particular conflict that was happening in Central Africa called the LRA, the Lord's Resistance Army, which was run by a rebel warlord who you guys may have heard of. He had been made famous by a 2012 campaign, a man called Joseph Kony. And so we set out to try to stop the LRA, and that was about 10 years ago now.
So you're an American company with involvement in 60 countries, and you're going to try to stop this person who's like a vapor in the night.
Pretty crazy, right?
So what was the first step? And you were going to do it by unconventional means. So when you look at a problem like that and you think, I'm a hands-on organization, so what options did you consider, and what option did you ultimately choose to try to address Joseph Kony?
Yeah, so it was really important to get a sense of why this group had been so successful at causing so much devastation. Killing tens of thousands, kidnapping children and young girls as sex slaves, young boys as child soldiers. They had been quite successful, and so you have to ask yourself, what's leading to their success? Why aren't they being restrained? And a couple of themes really came up in all the time that we spent on the ground studying and trying to learn and understand them. It was lack of communications in the communities that they were causing this horror in. And it was lack of training for the military group that was pursuing them. So the Ugandan army was pursuing Joseph Kony and his rebel group and trying to stop them. And they were inadequately trained for the job, and that was very obvious. And we continue to hear that from the State Department and from our friends at Human Rights Watch and other organizations, that those were the two missing pieces. And so naturally, both of those scared me, but the thought of providing military training to a foreign army really scared me. So I'm like, let's try the communications thing and see if we can get there. So we did. We jumped in with this amazing individual, a Catholic priest named Abbe Benoit, and who's just one of my lifelong heroes. He was a man that had an idea. This is an area where there's no cell phone towers, so different communities can't speak to each other. And so when there's mass attacks, for instance, the 2008 Christmas massacre, they might go into a village and slaughter all 80 people in that village, right? And I mean, horrific slaughter, cutting babies out of pregnant mamas, beating these children to death with clubs or blunt axes. I mean, horrific killings. And then there might be a village, 12 kilometers away that doesn't know that this has happened. And so then they head on to that village and kill additional people. In one of the massacres, almost 900 people were killed, right? And this is how they're doing it, by sort of piecemealing into these remote villages. And so Abbé Benoit had this incredible idea that what if we're able to communicate with each other? We might not save the village who sends out the early warning signal. That village might be slaughtered, but perhaps they're warning the other nearby villages who can then flee, make their way to a United Nations compound perhaps, and kind of cling to the fences of that compound, in hopes that the LRA wouldn't dare go that far. And so that's what we did. We set up a radio alert unit. We set this up in multiple villages. Generally, the village elder would be in charge of this, and what we did was we would prop up these HF radio systems on bamboo poles. There you'll see a long bamboo pole there. And each of these villages would report in attacks and warn other villages, and then they could pull the bamboo pole down at night so that it wasn't visible. And it became this incredible resource in terms of communities being able to communicate with one another what they were seeing. And what we found was oftentimes someone might have been tending their crops or something like that and might have noticed some people that didn't look like they should be there, potentially LRA, and they could come back and send an early alert even within their villages, which was really good. But what that led to, as often happens when you kind of dip your toe into something, you guys have done this, by the way, from what I'm hearing on these wells that you guys are doing in Nicaragua, right? You think you're going to go do 1 or 2 wells and help, and you guys are up to 500 wells. Well, same concept here, right? When you dip your toe into something, it just kind of domino effects in terms of your involvement and engagement. And so what we found was, as these communities were talking to each other, we were actually getting incredibly important and credible information and intelligence. We were starting to see patterns of attacks, and we thought, gosh, this information would be very useful to the United Nations. It would be useful to humanitarians who could respond. It's a useful advocacy tool, because then we can say, look, we know the way that the LRA operates, we know where they are, go fix this. And so we ended up publishing the information that was coming from this to a real-time website that still lives today, that you guys can check out if you want later, called the LRA Crisis Tracker. And we were able to really understand the gravity of the LRA's destruction through this intelligence tool. And then comes the really hard question, right? So if you know where they are, and if you know their strategies, what are you going to do to stop them? And that just beckoned the training question even further. And that was one that I really had a tough time with. As a private individual, I'll say that I have been my biggest critic this entire time. I'm a peacemaker at heart. That's been the motivation for my life's work. And the idea of training a foreign army to try to stop a perpetrator was definitely out of the box thinking for me. And I also really, as a humanitarian and a credible one, I really felt like, this could also be a very dangerous precedent we could set. Just if any private individual was able to really help a foreign army become powerful, a lot of situations aren't like the LRA where it's really clear who the bad guy is. There's messier situations on the globe. And so we just had to really contemplate the ethical dilemmas there, the moral dilemmas, the legal implications. I needed to understand legally how much room and how much authority we would have to actually even consider something like this. But at the end of all that, we did decide to hire military trainers to train the Ugandan army and to train an elite force within the Ugandan army to pursue and hopefully release the hostages of the LRA. And so you'll see some pictures on the screen of our training. A lot of these men didn't know how to swim, so that was a huge reason they weren't able to close on the LRA. The LRA had taught themselves how to swim, and so the LRA would be running from the Ugandan army, and they'd get to a stream, and the LRA would go across the stream, and the Ugandan army would just stop, right, because they couldn't swim. And so it was basic things that they learned in terms of swimming, getting their equipment across a river in a way that would be safe, and in a way that they could protect themselves. It was hostage release training. So you've got these incredibly horrific warlords that surround themselves with the children they've kidnapped. So it's not like you can just shoot at the warlords, because you would mow down children in the process. So what does a technique look like to try to peel these children away and to get them back home? They learned ground techniques in terms of navigation and understanding how to really move around, how to notice certain footprints and what those footprints meant in terms of directions of the enemy. In their spare time, they even taught me some things that impressed my 2 little boys back home. So here I am, petrified. I don't look it in the picture. I wish you could see my face there. Petrified, learning how to rappel out of a helicopter. There's me right before. Sang a lot of prayers before I was hanging over the Central African jungles on a string. Yes. Ooh, some of those things, I don't know what I was thinking. But no, it was incredible. So we put those troops out, deployed them, and instantly saw success that led to a number of important things. So Joseph Kony is the first ever indictee of the International Criminal Court, and 2 of his commanders were also indictees of that criminal court. So the first 3 indictees ever of the criminal court were still operating in this area and still doing this work. What we found through our training is we were able to ultimately capture and remove from the battlefield 2 of the 3. So we got to all but Kony. In fact, one of those commanders is on trial right now in The Hague for his crimes. The other thing that was incredibly unique, sorry, I'm just going on because I get so excited when I talk about this because I just worked with these incredible people. The Ugandan officials made a critical decision in this time, right? So think about it this way. So this had been going on about 3 decades. So a lot of the people that Kony had kidnapped as children from schools. So he would go into schools and kidnap children. Maybe they were 10, 11 when they were kidnapped, these boys. Now they're 30 years old, right? And they had been trained to fight in this army. But they, of course, had been kidnapped as innocents. And the Ugandan army really understood that. And they said, anyone who is not an International Criminal Court indictee and chooses to voluntarily surrender, we will give an amnesty to. And that's a hard call to make as a government, right? I mean, it's hard for us to understand. I mean, people were, tens of thousands of people killed and so many displaced and so much destruction. It's so hard for us to understand that. But my goodness, was it strategic. I mean, it was so strategic. And so what would happen then as a result is we could identify a commander like this. We would know approximately the area that he was operating in. We knew that 20 years ago, he was kidnapped out of his school. We would fly back to his hometown, take our iPhones, find his mom, find his sister, ask them to record a message for him, directed at him, asking and pleading for him to come out and come home. We would plug our phones into this helicopter speakers that we had, and these just massive speakers on either end of our helicopters, as you see here, and just hover over the areas that we suspected them to be operating and play in their parents' voice. Some of the moms sang Acholi songs in their tongue, asking their children to come home. And as a result, we had almost 900 walk out of the jungle. And that's... But that's what really dismantled the LRA. So we saw over a 90% reduction in the violence, from hundreds of killing in a single year to only 14 killed last year. And I'll tell you, I'll be very honest, I went into this thinking Kony was the key to this group, and that success meant getting Kony off the battlefield. And what we learned along the way from our incredible teachers and the Ugandans and those who were able to forgive and those who set such beautiful examples for us is what we learned along the way is that he was not at all the key, that the key was dismantling the organization from within. So cutting the snake off the head rather than the head off the snake. And anyway, it was a real privilege to get to learn that.
Incredible story. So your Bridgeway is gazing across the globe now, looking at other situations and kind of deciding what's next, and it's complicated beyond belief. So when do you expect that you'll actually start doing some new things? Is it a year, 2 years, 5 years? Don't know. When will the next things occur?
Yeah, so we're really trying to be strategic. I think the LRA, when we sat back and decided the LRA was the group that we were going to try, there was some real reasons for deciding that. The LRA was a non-state actor, so it wasn't supported by any country's president per se, right? Like, so we weren't taking on another country, an independent country. That was very helpful for us. There was a sovereign force, the Ugandan army, that had the authority and the ability to pursue the LRA. So it was easy to try to empower them and help them sort of bridge some gaps to get there. And there was a global consensus about the bad guy, right? I mean, you could ask anyone and everyone, and there was, you were going to have a 99.9% Coney is a bad guy type return. Some of these other conflicts are quite complicated and don't look the same. And so I think right now what we're trying to do is really pay attention to the region and see if there's anywhere else that all of these things we've learned. In particular, I think the messaging and the defection messaging that we've done is really a powerful tool. Is there some way for us to translate that to other environments? And I'm hoping in the next 18 months or so we might have an idea about that.
So 2 really short follow-ups and then we'll be done. First of all, what do we know about Joseph Kony now? Is he still out there? We know he's not doing much, obviously, but is he still out there?
Yeah, so he's a bit of a coward, right? But we see this with a lot of these people who run these organizations, right? They'll throw their guys out to take the hits, and they'll kind of stay off in the ivory tower. And he was very similar. So we believe he's in Darfur, Sudan. We actually, something I didn't touch on when I was going through our history is we actually did identify precisely where he was at one point, and the U.S. Special Forces had flown a surveillance drone over the area, and we actually confirmed that he was present in that camp. And so we did launch an operation. He was very far away from where they were causing problems. We did launch an operation, and someone somehow had tipped him off because we missed him by a few hours. Those are the extra helicopters we brought in for that operation there on the slides. So we believe he's in the same place. I just last year thought to myself, let's take a satellite image of the area that he was in, because he was rather large in the surveillance video and he's quite old, and so thought he's probably made his way back to what he knows. And it looks like that area is about 10 times larger in terms of crops. So we're very much assuming that he is still there. Something you can identify in these images is the Acholis. He's an Acholi from northern Uganda. They tie a special knot when they make their housing. And so it's pretty easy to identify whether or not particular housing was built by Acholis. So we believe that he's there. But at this point, he's not causing, like you said, any trouble. In fact, I think he had so much trouble for a period of time that he's probably just choosing to live out his days with his large crops out there.
Well, Shannon, we have to wrap up because we're out of time, but I want to tell you how great it is for us to meet someone that has done so much, and you're such an inspiration to us, and thank you for coming.
Well, thank you. No, it's a pleasure. And I just want to thank you guys. Seriously, I'm incredibly impressed about what you guys are doing in Nicaragua. And I have to say, I mentioned this earlier to Jeff, when I travel and I'm over in these places that are, significant war zones in the middle of nowhere, I very often see the Rotary symbol. And I just not enough people know what the Rotarians do here in America, and I'm just deeply grateful for you guys' investment and for your concern for people outside of our borders as well, so thank you.
Yeah, well, Shannon, thank you. We are honored, we're humbled that you shared your time with us. You are a great example of someone with a servant heart who has taken that into servant leadership, and we appreciate that, so thank you very much for your time. Shannon has to go catch a plane because she's a busy, busy person, so she'll be leaving now. So thank you. And Jeff, thank you. Again, Jeff, thank you for the gift that you've given our club today. What a treat, huh? So our book that we'll be donating to Celia Clinton this week is entitled The Little Raindrop, and Shannon jotted a nice little note to the students in there. So, upcoming programs. Next week we are meeting here. It's 2 weeks that we're meeting at the zoo, so come here next week. We're going to be celebrating our Rotary Club of Tulsa Foundation, and we're going to recognize some donors who have, and all of you are donors who have faithfully supported our club's foundation. And we're also going to recognize 4 nonprofit organizations who are beneficiaries of your great giving this year. So you'll want to come and hear about all the good we're doing locally. And then on May 16th, in 2 weeks, we will meet at the Tulsa Zoo, where I know a lot of you were there 2 years ago when we visited, and they had just started construction on the Lost Kingdom. And so Terry Carell, our member, and Tulsa Zoo director is going to, we're going to tour the Lost Kingdom and see what that's all about. And then she'll tell us all about the other exciting things coming up out at the Tulsa Zoo. So put both of those on your calendar, please. Now, I encourage you, go out, tell your Rotary story to your friends, and don't forget to bring that friend to Rotary next week. We are dismissed.